this session on video so that if somebody wants to talk about it later or to watch it, they will be free to do so. And today we're going to talk about some communicative activities and games to practice vocabulary and to boost vocabulary skills in students. I'm going to show a few activities, and I really hope that when at the end of the session we're going to analyze a few slides from our lessons, from the new lessons, you will probably have your own ideas how we can make a better vocabulary practice, or you will probably just say that the practice in the course is okay and it works for you. So let us start. Now, the way I'm going to talk about these things, the way I was selecting the criteria the other day when I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking about along these lines. First of all, I wanted to collect some activities for which you require no or very, very little preparation, 10 minutes at the most, and hopefully less than that. Then I wanted to select activities which work well with Skyeng lessons, the lessons which you already have and the lessons which we're in the process of creating, so the ones which we are going to see in the very near future. I wanted to select criteria which would be suitable for individual online lessons and for group online lessons as well. That is for those of you, if there are any, who work with simultaneous teaching of several students. I also wanted to select activities which would be suitable or that could be easily adapted for different ages without losing the relevance, so that they would not seem too childish or too grown up, no matter what age group of students you work with. And finally, some activities are relevant for grammar practice as well. But even if the activity is relevant for grammar, it should still have its primary focus on vocabulary. So let me quickly tell about a few games that you could use and that you probably already use, and feel free to comment on them in the chat, whether they work for you, whether you would use them differently, whether you've tried and they didn't work, which is also very important. So the first game is the Yes game, and this game is good for low-level students or for a warm-up activity, which helps students to boost their vocabulary by asking the teacher questions to which the teacher may truthfully answer yes. Like, for example, are you Russian, or are you British, or I don't know, are you Azerbaijani, or are you Kazakh, or whatever? Are you sitting down? Have you got a pet, etc. And the student gets a point for each question that the teacher answers yes. And some of the lexical areas that could be practiced like that are nationalities, habits, daily routine. Like, for example, have you had coffee today? Something like that. Pets, household objects, like, do you have a slow cooker? Something like that. Or some other belongings. Have you ever tried this game? On the outside, it looks like it's a grammar activity, but in fact, the main focus is on vocabulary. Okay. The next one is negative sentence game, and it also works really well with low-level students, and that's how you play it. You ask the student to form as many negative sentences as he or she can, and the same as with the previous game, you give a point for each correct negative sentence. And the sentences can be about any object. So basically, with this game, even with very, very low-level students, you can practice descriptive skills, you can practice adjectives, you can practice nouns, you can practice basically anything, any lexical area. Because, for example, the students can talk about a specific object, I don't know, for example, you can show them a telephone, and they will say things like, it is not big, it is not red, it is not plastic, or something like this. And of course, there is no way for them to know whether it is plastic or whether it's metal. So it is you who will give them a point for each correct sentence. Or you can talk about abstract ideas for high-level students. Like, for example, you can talk about such very abstract but very important ideas, like, for example, tolerance or freedom. And sometimes it really helps the students to define an abstract idea by telling what it is not about. Like, for example, very soon I'm going to give a webinar to our methodologists on developing creative skills, critical thinking in students. And one of the ways to define what critical thinking is was by telling what it is not. It is not the ability to criticize whatever you see, but it's something different. So this negative sentences game is much more important than it may seem at first sight. Okay, the next game comes very close. In fact, it's a combination of both. Okay, say something negative about coronavirus. That's very easy to say, actually. Coronavirus is not a good thing to have. And that's a negative sentence, isn't it? Coronavirus is not good for your health, and something like that. And Dari writes, a good game. I tried one, but the answer is yes or no, were tabooed. A taboo game is another thing. That's something we're going to talk about in a few minutes. The yes-no game is when you tell students that they're not allowed to say yes or no and cannot repeat the responses. And then you ask them a series of questions. And then you swap the roles and you let the students ask you a series of questions. And in this way, you can practice actually any lexical area. So the focus here is on communication strategies, on being able to explain certain things by using a limited range of vocabulary. And in this way, you can elicit longer answers and you can get your students to provide more details rather than giving a single sentence or a single word answers. Like, for example, let's practice a little bit. So my question is, if you want to, feel free to switch your mics on so that we could chat a little bit, okay? So tell me please, so who'd like to start? Did you have eggs for breakfast today? Remember that you are not allowed to say yes or no, and you cannot repeat responses. So who'd like to say a few words?
I didn't.
Okay, I didn't, but there is actually the word no, even if the form of not.
I absolutely negatively had them.
Okay, that's an excellent answer. Could somebody else answer this question as well? Did you have eggs for breakfast today?
You can just say negative, you know, like in the army.
No eggs. That is no. The word no is actually
yes. The word no is there, so we need to avoid it. But what about different communication strategies? You could say, for example, I had a toast for breakfast. Would that answer the question? In fact, yes. But that would mean that you provide some other vocabulary, don't you? Okay. Let's practice with the next question. Is J.K. Rowling your favorite author? So any ideas how to answer them? Okay, Tatiana says she's great. Somebody says, of course. Okay. Any other questions? And we're not allowed to repeat the previous questions. The previous answers.
Negative.
Negative, okay. Or you can probably say, I can't. Yes, sorry, say it again.
Roger that.
Okay. Or you can say, I can, or you can say probably that I like other authors. I prefer other authors, something like that. So it is not as easy as it may seem to avoid using the words yes or no. But in fact, we have already used different strategies. Like, you know, we tried paraphrasing, we used antonyms. Instead of talking about eggs, I just gave another option. I had this for breakfast, something like that. So you see, you can tell your students how they can avoid awkward answers, avoid answering awkward answers, or how they can employ different communication strategies to answer the very, very simple questions. So this can be an interesting game. It's a great time filler, and it does not require to know a lot of words, but it will require the students to try and to use them in some ways which they would probably not use them like that. Okay. Gonchanaeva says that I already like the yes or no game. Unfortunately, I have to go. Well, we are recording this on video. So if you like that, I will share the presentation and you will have access to the video, right? Because we're going to do quite a bit of practice. Another game, which I quite like and I use it quite often, is Guess the Photo. It is good to practice naming objects, to develop analytical thinking skills, and to revise vocabulary. So basically, this game helps you to elicit phrases and simple sentences from your students. And all you need, it does require some preparation, but 10 minutes are enough. You will need a printed or electronic photos of objects, animals, anything which is related to the topic that you have been studying. You can show your students a part of a picture, whether it's electronic or whether it's on paper. So you can just hold it against the camera. And then you move it up to open gradually. And the student's task is to guess or to recognize what the picture shows and name the object. And of course, the photo may have several objects on in it. And if you're working with a group, then the first student to correctly name the object scores a point. If you use several pictures, then you can just count how many objects a student can name. As a variation, you can put up several photos on the screen and ask one student to choose a photo, but not tell others which photo it is. Or if you're working, if this is an individual lesson, you just swap the roles. And then you ask questions like, for example, is there a this or is there a that, to guess the photo? And you can limit time. For example, you can say you have only 1 minute to guess, to tell me what the photo is by asking questions and listening to my answers. And then you have the same problem. The student thinks of a photo, and you guess it by asking questions. So it can be played very easily, but you need a photograph, or you can use one of the pictures which you have in our courses. Another game which is very similar, and that's something we're going to try and practice, is played like this. You show the student a picture with several objects in it, and you show it for 5 seconds only for grown-up students. And then you ask questions like what was in the picture, how many objects there were, and everything, anything like that. Let's practice it. I'm going to show you a photo. It's going to be a photo of a room, so nothing difficult, but you will see it for 5 seconds only. And then we'll try to work together to tell how many objects there were, what objects there were, and everything, stuff like that. So, are you ready? Let's take a look at the photo. I will do the counting. Okay, so what did you notice in the photo? Can you name anything?
There were sofas, tables, curtains, paintings, and much more.
Okay. How many sofas were there?
There were 2.
2, okay, because we're going to go back to the picture and check. Did anybody notice what was there on the sofas?
Cushions.
Cushions, that's right. What color were the cushions?
Blue and mustard.
Blue and something else, okay. And how many cushions were there?
4.
4, okay. Then you said there were
tables. Were 5, I think.
Okay, we're going to come back and count, but you see how interesting it is because you start getting different opinions, and even if this is a one-to-one lesson, you would still have something to think about because you want to make sure that you were right. So it's quite interesting. Speaking about the tables, was there anything on the tables?
Yes, there was. I think there was a vase.
Okay, there was a vase. Was there one vase or were there more vases anywhere else in the room? It's hard to notice. Because you had only 5 seconds, and unless you're a very, very visual thinker, this game is not quite as easy. And what color were the curtains? Okay, somebody says there were 6 cushions. There was a photo frame. There was a lamp. All right. Well, basically, you get the idea.
Or beige, I think, or something. Beige. Probably.
Beige. Okay, the curtains were beige. Now, let's take a look and see what we noticed and what we didn't notice. So the curtains, yes, I think beige is the right color. There were 4 cushions on the sofa. And were there 2 sofas or 1 sofa?
1, I think, right?
Yes, because on the left, it's an armchair, but it's a very big armchair. That's why it may look like a sofa. No one mentioned any of the sideboards or the cabinets, whatever you call them. We've noticed the vases, and there were several of them. We've noticed the photo frame, the pictures, and then you can just ask students to name what they failed to mention. And that will lead them to describe in the picture but this will be a very natural activity, much more interesting and meaningful for them, rather than you just show them a picture and say, oh, could you please describe what you see in the picture? Because they don't really understand why they should describe the picture. And if you're preparing students for a lot of exams, and in particular for the Russian national exam, unfortunately, there is a picture describing task there. Why I say unfortunately is because lots of students don't see the point in describing pictures. They say, if I want to show a picture to somebody, I'll just take a photo of it and send it via any messenger. Okay, let's move on to some other activities. I quite like this guessing game because it requires no preparation as well. I tend to be a lazy teacher. And that's how you play it. You describe something to the student. Like, for example, what do I have? It's a fruit, it's yellow, it's sour. What is it?
Lemon, a lemon, of
Yes,
course.
it's a lemon. Or next one, it's an animal, it jumps, it doesn't have teeth.
A frog.
A frog, that's right. You could have thought
I think
about
the frog has teeth, doesn't it?
does it?
Yeah, I think it does.
Oh, we can go online and check if the student asked this question. But then again, if I hadn't mentioned the teeth or the lack of teeth, the students could have named a rabbit or a kangaroo. But I'm not sure about frogs. I've always thought that frogs don't have teeth. So could please somebody go online and check if frogs have teeth, because that's really
Yes, they do. Google says
they
it.
do.
Yep.
Okay, then I need to change the example. But that's another thing, because from this you can go to even a more detailed description of the animal or whatever. So this game is easy to play. For younger students, you can use pictures, like, they've guessed, oh, that's right, it's a lemon, and you show them the lemon. And for older students, obviously, you don't need to do that. And then you ask the student to describe something to you, and you name the object. Okay, so the world is full of new information, like toothy frogs. Okay, and then another game helps to think of a semantic field rather than of a particular word, because you have to activate this background knowledge to be able to name this word. Like, for example, you choose a topic which you have been using with your students, have been discussing or working on, and you choose 5 words relating to this conversational themes. And then you prepare a set of clues to help students guess the word. Like, for example, if you were talking about politics and the word is freedom, you can use clues like this. They're not very obvious, just to make life a little bit more difficult for the student. Well, that's not true, just to make the student think of how else they could describe this word. And here are different descriptions, like a linguistic, I'm a noun, but I'm very important, and they start thinking about nouns. I begin with the letter F, and you focus your students on spelling. People in prison have lost it and want it back, and it's not money, because it begins with F. And people demand it when it is taken away by dictators. So every time you narrow down the semantic field, and the students think about the associations, the connotations, and the collocations in which they can use the word. And you can say, finally, it can be related to speech, like freedom of speech. So in most cases, students will guess this word. So it depends. It depends on the clues. Okay. Next one. I'm reading the comments in the chat, like, if we go technical, then whales have legs. And that's really interesting, because you see how many small details, small but important details, we can go to, starting with these very simple exercises. They're all only seemingly simple, but they open up huge opportunities. The next one is description game. What you can do is you need to think of names of different objects. You can either write them on cards to show to students, or you can just send them to the students in the chat. And then the student picks an object and writes or says 5 descriptive sentences about the object without naming it. But the description should be as detailed as possible, and that's when the vocabulary activity comes in. You can use a word bank to show to your student. I'm going to show one of the versions of such a word bank to you. And then the student reads the description for the partner, in our case, in case of one-to-one lessons for the teacher, to name the object. And here is the word bank. It is not very typical as word banks go, because here we have a lot of words which could be used depending on what objects you throw into the list. And some of the words are quite difficult. Like, for example, if your student is a guy, he will probably have no idea what color fuchsia is, because he will probably tend to call it pink. And I don't see why he shouldn't be right. But you give him a lot of more variation, and ladies tend to be more color sensitive than men. And I particularly like, for example, the column which describes sound, because that's not something that an average student would use in everyday speech. That really boosts the vocabulary, like rustling, blaring, rattling, whining, screech, something like that. And even if the words stay in the long-term memory without the students using them, it is still good because they will be able to memorize them and to remember them when time comes. Another game which can be done, it is a very visual game, and it is a great way for the student to move around a little bit during the lesson. This is the adverb game. You ask the student to do something in a certain way according to an adverb. You can even choose the adverbs in alphabetical order, but that's not necessary. And this action should be something that you can see on the camera. Like, for example, if somebody is sitting in a room with the curtains, you can ask them to, for example, draw the curtains anxiously, or cheerfully, or brazenly. That's not easy to show. And we are not assessing the acting ability here, but this is rather asking students to use kinesthetics, to use those adverbs, and to realize that adverbs define a verb. They tell how an action is done, and to pick up, and helps them to pick up some vocabulary. So the adverbs should be physical, but not demanding and easily visible. Or you could put up a list of adverbs in the chat or on your screen, and let the student choose one, and then the student does something, and the teacher needs to guess how it was done. If you feel playful, I don't know whether it's the right word to say about the teacher in a lesson, but anyway, if you feel playful, you can swap the roles and also do something for the student to guess. And this imitates a very popular party game, like all those pantomimes, and students tend to like it. And we just use it to practice adverbs.
It like works with your muscle memory, right? It helps you remember the words.
Yeah, that's right, because you use kinesthetics, and we have about 10 to 15% kinesthetic learners, even though as adults, we become very universal learners. We can use different techniques, but basically you get it under your skin into your muscles, and it makes it easier to remember. Like, for example, many years ago, that was in 1996, a quarter of a century ago, I was attending a series of methodology lessons at University of Northumbria in Newcastle upon Tyne. And in one of those lessons, the teacher was explaining to us the difference between different ways of walking, like, trudging through the snow, stamping your feet, something like that, dragging your feet and everything. And basically what he did was he just mimicked all those actions. I still remember all of them. I still remember that list of words, even though a quarter of a century has passed. I can't believe I'm that old, I hope. But as time goes, that's how it happens. So it does work. At least it worked for me. Now, the next game can be played on the spot. You need no preparation. You just ask the student to get something in their room. Like, for example, get something blue, or get something round, or get something the size of your head. And the lexical areas that you can practice are colors, shapes, and sizes. Obviously, this should be everyday objects, something that the student is likely to have. But rather than, like, for example, asking the student, get me a pen, you ask them to be guided by some other characteristics. So you practice comparative degrees of comparison, and you practice adjectives. And the student chooses what there can be. So unless they're taking this lesson from a desert, they will be able to find something. Or at least, if they have nothing blue in their room, you can quickly change the color. Or you can ask them, okay, what color do you have? Now get me something of this color. All right, now let me take a look at the chat. Tatiana Gershko writes, the same game for kids. I spy with my little eye something blue. Yes, but this game, Get Something, is a little bit more physical because you actually get your student to move around a little bit, to bring this object, to show it to you. So kids love it. Yeah, but it really is a variation on I Spy game. Here are some more activities. One of them that I really like, which requires no movement. If you're feeling tired at the end of the day, you can use this. It's a disappearing text. And that's how you do it. You show the student a text and the student reads it aloud. Then you delete one word and the student reads the text again, substituting the word from memory. Then you delete another word and or several words, or you delete the same word in all the places where you see this word. And then the game is played until the entire text is memorized. It's great to learn poems by heart like that. Or you probably want the student to memorize certain words. So basically, you can use this to practice any lexical area, and you can focus on collocations. And it can be a really fun activity in a rather unexpected way. Let me show you how it works, and let me show what else can be done with this activity. Okay, and Valerie writes, there is an adult variations for scientists. I can't spy with my little eye to name micro objects that can be in the room. All right, and that's really interesting. Now, let's practice this a little bit. So could you please look at this text? Of course, I will not ask you to read it aloud as I would have asked my students. And the reason why I would ask them to read it aloud is so that they would put together the visual forms of those words and the sound, so that for auditory learners and for visual learners, this exercise would work better. So I'll give you 1 minute to read this text, and then we'll proceed to practicing it. Okay, have you finished reading the text? Give me a nod of yes or shake your head of no. Okay, now here is the text. Which word is missing?
Spiders.
Yes, okay, now let's look at another version. So spiders are still missing.
Legs.
But then furry legs, okay. Next one, what else is missing?
Eyes. Yeah.
Eyes, that's right, little red eyes. Okay.
Am I the only one playing?
No, you're just the fastest one. Okay, what is missing now in this sentence, especially if it's one of those really big
legs?
Really big spiders with what? Legs were there somewhere, that's true.
With fur legs.
Furry legs.
Furry legs, that's right, and little
red eyes.
Red eyes, that's right. So basically, that's how you go on playing this game. But now let's look at this text. What other words could you use to fill in the gaps? Not necessarily related to spiders.
Spiders have teeth too, by the way.
Okay.
So they could
Well,
have
they would
really
have,
big
because
teeth.
otherwise, how would they be able to suck the blood out of the poor victims? Okay, so I have a friend who is afraid of what? Or of whom?
Insects?
Of what? Insects?
Frogs.
Okay. Of frogs?
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus? Okay. But then you probably, okay. How would you use, how would you fill in, if we're talking about coronavirus, because that's a brilliant idea, what would you fill in the gaps in that sentence? But if one comes in the house, we're talking about coronavirus, especially if it's one of those really big
Men.
Okay, I was thinking about coronavirus, but anyway, very big man, because you're talking about somebody who carries coronavirus. With what?
With hairy legs.
With hairy legs and little. Then I go, you, and I try to get rid of it. Well, and little something, I don't know, little red eyes or whatever. Something like that. So you can take this game, you can start by playing this game by using, by just memorizing the words. But then you can take it to a totally different level by asking students to use some other words instead of the original words. And you can either ask for synonymous expressions, and that makes sure that the students stay in the same field that you've started the game with. Or you can ask them on purpose to use totally different words that will change the story. And then you can see how interesting this story may become. Because you see, if we substitute spiders with Ben, it turns into a story that you want to read to the end, because you don't really realize, or rather, it's hard to imagine what is going to happen next, what is going to happen in the end. So it becomes quite a fun exercise, which develops students' creativity and still makes them use the words and look at what other words these words could be used together with. And that brings us to another option in which you use words to build stories. Like, for example, you can prepare a numbered list of familiar words, and nouns work best here. These words can be names of famous people, of common objects, colors, animals, and so on. Like, for example, you can use words like this: a bird, a wheelbarrow, a hammer, a cow, a witch, whatever. And the good thing about this is that you don't really have to be very careful selecting those words, because first of all, students will throw a dice and they roll a dice to see which words they will need to use. That's why if you have only numbers from 1 to 6 on the dice, you will need a few lists with numbers from 1 to 6, list A, list B, list C, and so on. So that at the first throw of the dice, you choose a word from list A, then from list B, and so on. So basically, the students roll the dice to pick the words, and then the student must begin telling a story, connecting all these words together convincingly, and convincingly is the key word here. And the story needn't be long, complicated, or even true. Like, for example, yesterday when I was thinking about this kind of exercise, I thought that I had read a small article telling that, for example, Queen Elizabeth II abhors garlic, and she does not allow garlic to be used in her meals, and she doesn't like onions either. But she can eat some onions, but she doesn't eat garlic. And that made me thinking, like, for example, what if I include in this list such a word as silver? And if the student, for example, picks, by rolling the dice, picks the words Queen Elizabeth, garlic, and silver, what kind of story could that be? Because it helps to put words into a perspective and to think about stereotypes and something like that. But still, the main thing is to use the words correctly and to use them convincingly. This is a good practice if you want to teach your students to start speaking on the spot. Another game which I really like and which really works well if you teach students to compare things is the similarities and difference game. For this game, you need pairs of near synonyms. And you can use synonyms dictionary for ideas. Like, for example, a clock and a watch, a cafe and a restaurant, a house and a flat, something like this. A river and a stream, for example, a lake and an ocean. You give the student a limited time to think of as many similarities and differences between these words as he or she can. Let's try to play with it on the spot. Could you please tell how a cafe and a restaurant are similar?
They both serve food.
Mm-hmm. They both serve food, that's right. How else are they similar?
They have
What do you call? Yes?
Yes,
They have waiters.
Yeah.
They have waiters, okay. What else do they have?
Managers.
They have managers, all right.
Well, they are both dangerous nowadays.
Okay, they're both dangerous nowadays. That's another similarity.
They
Any
were
other
dangerous
ideas?
Menus.
before.
Hmm? Yes, they have menus. That's right. Okay, and how are they different? So there are plenty of similarities. That's the easiest part of this exercise. But how is a cafe?
Is more expensive usually.
Okay, the prices are different because the restaurant is more expensive. What else is different?
Cafes usually don't have much variety on their menu as a restaurant would have.
Okay, there's less variety in cafes. That's true.
There's high probability to not to finish your meal hungry, as the portions are sometimes very small in a restaurant.
Okay, so the size of the portions is, can be different. What about, for example, live music? Where are you likely to hear live music? In a cafe or in a restaurant?
In a restaurant, probably.
Yes, in a restaurant. So you can work with the students, asking them questions. But what you do in this kind of exercise is you help them to build up a semantic field, because they think about everything related to a restaurant and to a cafe. And by this exercise, they brush up their vocabulary, and they basically describe an idea. And rather than comparing to actual objects, you can ask them to compare abstract ideas as well, sometimes. But of course, it works best with physical objects. So that's another exercise which is very easy to prepare, very easy to start, and which can take you and the students pretty far. Another exercise, which is one of my favorite, and you probably use that as well, is asking students to fill in tables. So you prepare it in under 2 minutes. You think of the categories, and you ask the students to fill in tables using the words which start with the same letter. Like, for example, and then you can see how many words starting with that letter the students can think of. Like, for example, let's take a look at the upper table. Animals that begin with T. So a tiger, what other animals begin with the letter T?
Taurus. If it is it an animal, I wonder. Taurus is an animal, right?
Which one do you mean? Do you mean a tortoise?
No. Taurus is like a
bull.
cow. Yeah, like a cow, but
Oh,
Taurus.
okay.
Zodiac sign.
That's a good word, but it's not English.
Taurus is not English.
Oh,
Later.
if you're talking about the sun sign, the zodiac sign, it's probably not a real animal, but that's a good idea. Okay, a Taurus. Any other animals that start with a T?
A turtle. Would
A turtle?
tarantula be an animal or an insect?
Okay. What about a furniture? A piece of furniture that starts with a T?
Table.
A table. Any other pieces of furniture? Now, this is a particular nasty column because there are not many pieces of furniture that start with a T.
Is Torshare? Is it? No. Is it the Russian one?
No, it's not an English word. But
I was going to say table lamp. But...
A table lamp, but that's not a piece of furniture.
Exactly.
Could we use a TV stand instead?
It actually is an English word, Torshare. I just Googled it.
Oh, so they do use this French word. Okay. What about food that begins with T?
Taco.
A taco. Okay. What else?
A T-bone steak.
A T-bone steak. A brilliant animal that starts with the T was a Tyrannosaurus. Thank you for that great idea. Okay.
Tiramisu.
Sorry?
Tiramisu.
Tiramisu. Okay. Tangerines, toast, and some other more everyday foods. Okay, and then you continue with clothes, country, and so on. Or you can take one topic, like, for example, the house. But this game allows the students to think of a wider range of vocabulary, because you can ask them to think of something that you can find in a particular room. Like, for example, this time, let's change the letter. So let's start with the letter S. So what can you find in the living room that starts with an S? So one example is a sofa. One student once said socks, but that really depends on what kind of place you live in.
Well, that could be a safe, of course.
A
Maybe
safe,
behind
all
the
right.
picture.
Okay, there could be a safe, but you see, it's great when you explain in what case you can find it so that you can convince the classmates, but that's a great idea.
A stool.
What?
A stool? A stool to sit on?
Okay, yeah, a stool. What about satellite TV? Does it start with an S? Yes, it probably does. And so on. What can you find in the bedroom that starts with an S?
Sleeping corner.
Okay. What do you call this this type of clothes, this piece of clothes that some people wear when they go to bed? It starts with an S.
Sleeping suit?
Yes, a sleeping suit or a sleeping gown, something like a nightgown, something like that. Okay. What do you call a piece of cloth which you put on your bed?
A sheet.
Sheet, that's right. It starts with an S, although the sound is different. And sometimes the students don't realize that. Okay. What do you call a piece of footwear, the footwear which you can wear in the house, especially in the bedroom, that starts with an S?
Slippers.
Slippers, that's right. So you see, in this way, you can elicit vocabulary from the students. And then you continue with something in the bathroom, something in the kitchen, something in the office. And something in the office, I remember one student once said a secretary. So I had to explain that it's not really something, that it's a human being. But that's a fun game because students have all sorts of very different ideas. And office seems to be another difficult place for S words for some reason. Although you can find sheets of paper there, a stapler, something like that. All right. Let's have a look at a couple of more exercises. One of them is aimed at collocations. I normally explain the difference between words because very often students have a problem. They use a dictionary to translate themselves directly from their native language into English. And very often, one and the same word can have two different translations. Like, for example, the Russian word for быстрый can be translated into English as fast and quick. But the collocations are very different. So you can have a quick shower or a quick meal, but the train would be fast and the food is fast as well. So one of the things that you can do with the students is this. You can present them with a close exercise, but in this case, rather than, for example, taking away all the nouns or all the verbs or whatever and focusing on grammar, we focus on collocations. And if you look at this exercise, it's actually very, very easy to do because you can think about the words which collocate, which come together very typically. Like, for example, if you start with the first sentence, I met my ex-husband in 1995. We're in love. Which word is missing? Or what word is missing there?
Fell in love.
Fell in love at first sight. We're a fantastic relationship. What word is missing? Had. That's right. Then on our third anniversary, he proposed and we married. Got married, and so on and so forth. But the thing is that in textbooks, what you will normally see is the difference between make and do, and that's about it. And here we have the typical collocations with all these typical words. But then again, if you keep on reading, you will see that apart from all these words like to go, to do, to get, you will see phrases like he started working later and less attention to me. And what word is missing here?
Paid less attention.
Paid less attention. This is very, very easy to do, but it focuses your students' attention on collocations. So basically what you can do is you can take any text and practice with it like that. Just go with the lexical chunks as something that Hugh Dell is so fond of. And you can play collocations game like this. You can create a table, you can make a table, and some words can collocate with more than one word. Like, for example, when you think of free, what does the word free collocate with?
Free time.
Free time. What else? There's at least one more word there.
Free meal, maybe.
Free meal, exactly. Sometimes it can be free work, but let's hope that it doesn't happen too often. What about hard?
Work and time.
Yes, hard work and hard time. What about little?
Little work, little time, little sleep, little
Mhm.
sister.
And little sister, that's right. So basically, you can use this table to make your students become aware of collocation, and you can use free collocation dictionaries to create such exercises very easily and in no time. What I like about the first collocation dictionary is this. For example, you type in the word coffee, and it gives you two separate lists. One list has the words which come before coffee. Like, for example, black coffee, freshly ground coffee. What else comes before coffee?
Instant coffee.
Instant coffee, okay. What do you call coffee with added milk?
White coffee.
White coffee, that's right. And then it has a list of words which come after coffee, like coffee break. What else can we use?
Shop.
Coffee shop,
Coffee
that's
shop.
right. What else?
Coffee machine.
A coffee machine, okay. What else?
Addict.
Coffee addict, coffee table, something like that. So you see, you can already get those collocations by using that dictionary. Or another way to use this is you can ask your students to put two lists of words that collocate with coffee, for example, and then you can go online and show them what other expressions can be added to their lists. So that's another fun exercise because they're testing their knowledge. They see how much they remember, and at the same time, it's easy to check and to enlarge the students' vocabulary in this way. One of the other things I really like, and which comes close here, is working with semantic rows. So basically, you give a list of adjectives or a list of some other words to the students. Like, for example, if you want to describe somebody's physique, somebody's body, like fat, plump, overweight, thin, skinny, and so on. You can provide your students with a list and ask them to make a line and to use the word which means the largest person, to put it on the right, and for the smallest type of body build, you put the word on the left, and then you ask your students to put all the words in between in the right succession, from the smallest to the largest. Some words will fall into the same area, but some words like fat can be, you can explain that this is a rude word to say about somebody, while overweight is a medical term, which is more neutral, and something like that. So in the end, your students will have a row, they will have a line of words with extra characteristics about the usage of the words, about the collocations, and something like that. And it is easier to remember the entire semantic field if you put it in a row, because you see how words relate to one another. I was going to say something about that as well, because, and you can do it basically based on any principle. Like, for example, if you're talking about fruit, you can ask your students to categorize those fruits, for example, according to their size, according to their sweetness, according to the color, shades of color, something like that. So you can always add an extra dimension to this kind of exercise. And it requires no preparation, apart from probably a list of words, which the students are going to organize and to categorize. Now we're almost finished. There were some other types of exercises, but they were not quite as easy to create. They did not fall into my previous criteria, which I mentioned in the second slide. Like, that they should be easy to do online, require next to no preparation, and so on. But what I'd like you to do is, let's take a look, let's analyze a couple of exercises and see if they're communicative enough, or if we can add something to those exercises to, for example, give more focus on vocabulary. What I'm going to show to you is something that you probably have not seen. There is a new course, a new upper intermediate speaking course, which we have started. It is called Just Speak Lessons. And this course is very different from the other courses that we have at Skyeng. Right now, we have only 10 lessons, but this is the first unit which can be used. This course is focused on speaking, and it has a story. According to the storyline, the student is the main character of the course. He or she moves to the USA for a year to work there, and basically has to go through all the routine, has to fly to the USA and find the way at the airport, has to choose and rent some sort of house or a flat they choose during the lessons. They meet the neighbors. They do the shopping because they've just arrived in the country. They have lots of things to buy. They start a job. They make an appointment with the doctor and go through other various situations which you will normally go through when you move to a different country. And this course is different because it uses flipped classroom approach. So the homework is huge. Well, I mean, it's not too big, but the students do the homework to get to know the vocabulary, to do a little bit of grammar practice, and to develop some ideas. But in the lesson, they use this information in role plays and in other ways of practicing it. So they speak during the lessons all the time. So this course is very, very interesting for those teachers who like to speak during the lesson and who like to get the student to speak, because you don't have to pay much attention, or sometimes no any attention at all, to grammar and to explaining things, to giving the information. The students already have this information. And that's why vocabulary becomes very, very important for this practice. Let's take a look at this kind of exercise, and let's see if you think this is communicative enough. This lesson is about shopping. So the students need to look at the pictures and choose which items they need to buy. And then, and in this case, we tell the students that sometimes you don't really remember what something is called, but you can describe this object to let your partner understand what we are talking about. So this is the same kind of taboo game which you had, which you took a look at a little bit earlier in the day, and that's how you do it. Here are the objects: a slow cooker, an air freshener, a laundry basket, and so on. What would you say about this kind of exercise? Is it communicative enough?
They don't see the names, right? They only see the pictures.
There are two options. At first, they only see the pictures, but you can show them the names, and you can let them hear the names if you want to. But you would need to click on the cards to do that. So there are two.
I think it's cool. Yeah, it develops their skill of paraphrasing stuff, I think.
Yeah,
there's maybe a couple lessons like that on Skyeng. It's not.
Yeah,
not
and
developed
here we have
enough.
and here we have a lot of exercises like that in this course. Not in every lesson, obviously, because then it would get boring. But we have some other types of exercises as well, like this one. So they move from one department, then they go to the next department, to the sporting goods department, sports goods. And this is the role card. They're the customer. They need to buy a bicycle to move around before they can get a car. And they decide what kind of bike they want, and they have some expressions to help. So basically, this exercise is not focused on vocabulary so much as on the procedure of buying things. So we move from being able to describe things, we move on to being able to buy them, to all the functional language. But would you say that this exercise is very communicative? Obviously, we have a different purpose of this exercise. But do you think that the students, some students, might want a little bit of more, a little bit of vocabulary practice to go with this exercise? And how would you help them to practice vocabulary in this case, if they need it?
Vocabulary for bikes?
For bikes or for buying sports goods?
Well, you could show them some pictures, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Show them some pictures with names.
Okay, show pictures with names.
I think you can Google that type of stuff pretty easily, like sport equipment.
Mm-hmm. Sport equipment. Do you think, this would be just a very receptive kind of exercise.
Ask them to make some sentences with them, or maybe ask some questions.
Okay.
Well, you know, the standard routine.
Yeah, but the keyword here is standard. Can you think of a way to make it more communicative? Like, you know, probably use some of the things that we have been looking at.
You can always start by asking the student whether they're into sports. So of course, that's going to engage them immediately. And then afterwards, you can ask them what kind of sports, if they like any kind of sports equipment. Again, with the 5-second, you can show them a picture of a sports store and go back the next 5 seconds, ask them what they saw and see how many things they could name, perhaps.
Okay. So that turns it into a game, and that was a great application of one of the games which I showed to you, which can be done very easily. One of the things that that came to my mind right now, but I didn't think about it when I was preparing for this presentation, was this. Oh, or does somebody have any other ideas before I say something?
Well, probably we can always ask to help a friend who doesn't know English, yes, but wants a bike. This is a situation which happens a lot, and it provides the reason for students to speak.
Okay. One of the things that I thought about was this. I would probably ask the students to name those objects, if I have pictures, and then I would ask them to think of how else they could use these things, what else they could use them for. So not only for their direct purpose, like, you know, for example, you have a baseball bat, for example, and you use it to play baseball. But what else can you use a baseball bat for?
Self-defense.
Self-defense, that's something that springs to mind immediately. I have a friend who drives a car and he keeps a baseball bat in the car, just in case. He has never had to use it, neither for sports purposes nor for self-defense. But that's something that he used it for. Is there any other way in which you can use a baseball bat?
So the purpose of this exercise is so that say this word as many times as possible, yeah, and think of it in different ways.
Basically, to practice this vocabulary, so that they would know what this vocabulary item means, and so that they would memorize it. Like, for example, you could use a baseball bat as a prop for a door to keep the door open, or for some other things. But inventing creative uses for objects is another exercise, which is on the one hand creative, but on the other hand, you would have to explain why you think so and how you would use that, because sometimes students may come up with pretty weird ideas. So basically, the reason why I asked you to do that is because I wanted to show, and thank you so much for using one of the exercises which we took a look at, like, you know, with that picture and trying to remember what we saw. I wanted to show how easily we can introduce these kinds of exercises in any lesson if we feel that a student needs more practice, and how we can make this practice more communicative. So basically, we're going to sum up now, because we have spent together nearly an hour. In 2 minutes, there will be 1 hour. Time flies, and I know that you have lessons to give and you have lots of things to do. But was there any vocabulary game that I presented today that you would like to try and to use in your own online classes? Unless, of course, you've already been using it for ages.
Well, the one about the 5-second memory game, of course. With the pictures, we're already using that. I really like the one with the missing vocabulary. I think that's really useful, where you can get the student to fill in the blanks, and then it activates the passive vocabulary as well. So that was great.
Okay.
What's more, the no game, yes.
Okay, the no game and the yes and no game. All right.
Frankly speaking, I like the collocations and everything connected with collocations, and also the semantic lines. You know, this always to activate some vocabulary, to make students to use this vocabulary is actually great.
Yeah, And the best thing is it requires no preparation. That's what I like about them. And it is really fun because you can give so much extra information to your students. You can explain how the word is used in what situations, whether the word is offensive, whether it's high style and is used in poetry and something like that. You can even tell them how the words may change their connotations. Like, for example, the word skinny a few years ago, maybe many years ago, some years ago, used to mean a person who is rather too thin. But now go to the jeans department and you will see huge shelves filled in with skinny jeans. So that word became neutral. And rather than meaning a very thin person, it has got to mean just a type of clothes. And that's it, type of a size or type of the clothes cut. So that's really interesting as well. And it helps your students to see how there can be more to a word than lies on the surface and meets the eye. All right, thank you so much. If anybody else would like to probably share their favorite activity to practice vocabulary, I would be really happy to hear that.
I like your game called Guess the Word, and you said that the student should guess the word, but I thought that you could reverse this activity and make them make riddles to you, right? And explain the word from different angles.
Yeah, absolutely. And from receptive, by reversing the roles, you turn it into a productive game for the student, which is the next step.
All of them were cool. This was very nice. I don't know, maybe it's just me that likes games so much, but I think it's a very cool type of activity at a lesson. So thank you. It was very productive.
Okay, thank you very much. By the way, if you're interested, on Friday, I'm going to give a webinar at 2 p.m. this Friday. I'm going to give a webinar for Skyeng methodologies. And I'm going to talk about culture, and teaching students to avoid cultural faux pas. Like, doing something which would be considered rude, and they never meant it to be rude or just to be ineffective. So if you're interested, I can give you a link, and you may attend this webinar if you want to.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll publish it.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank
and
you.
I hope
Bye.
that you will have even more fun with your Skyeng lessons than you used to. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. See you.